Howdy, all you delicious people. Season 1, Episode 4 of Invincible. So, this episode is a little bit slower than any of the other episodes you've probably seen. It feels like the first 3 episodes they really had to get a lot done to help you understand uh, about the world of which Invincible lives in, where this episode it's like, oh, okay, we've kind of set everything up. Now let's just this episode a little bit of a slower approach, where I think we get to understand maybe whose side people are quite possibly on. Maybe people who haven't read the comic books are starting to uh, go into their conspiracy theories or their theory crafting to see where this story is going to head. For me, I did not I really wanted to eventually read these comic books, and eventually finding out that there was a series to be had was just like, yeah, I really have wanted to watch, or I really wanted to read these books, but now since there's a series out, I'm like, yeah, this is great. I've really enjoyed this series. It kind of delivers like a kick-ass freaking story, because we have it to where, again, characters don't have there isn't like an R on somebody's chest or a logo to be had, or everybody just is wearing whatever and then they have some name. Plus, I feel like it's funny to have an old-fashioned approach to this, where we have it to where when Invincible is mentioning what his name is, they cue right into the opening credits package of slapping the name out there, which I think is always interesting to put that in. What if within the episode they never have it to where Invincible says his name, and then they maybe wait till the very tail end of the episode to say this guy's name, and then slap the opening credits of a episode that is going to end, which I thought would honestly be hilarious. Um, Going into here, though, I really thought that this episode was kind of fascinating, because it's still really pulling at the fact of, okay, what side are you on? Are you on Omni-Man's side? Are you on Cecil's side? Are you on just Invincible's side because that's the best side to be on? Are you going to think that Invincible is going to end up with Adam Eve, or are you going to think that he's going to end up with Amber? Which side are you on? Which character do you really want within this episode? Here's one thing that I forgot to mention within the last review, because I completely spaced out about it. Evidently, we find out that Robot is a turncoat. He's a double agent, and I thought that was rather interesting. And when we have this episode, it really kind of plays out fairly interesting to see what Robot does with this episode. And so we'll see where this journey takes us. And I don't know, I'm really kind of going, okay, I can't wait till the next episode of this, because hopefully that episode will have a lot more going on, or maybe quite possibly we'll get further on into figuring things out. We have a little splash here and there, Detective Demon coming back into this episode, and so really we have it to where also Omni-Man is, I think, trying to recapture something or rekindle something. And so we have it to where Omni-Man has a very interesting thing going on within this episode. And we have it to where Invincible is kind of just enjoying his life for once, but also he's getting vigorously trained, and so like I think it's kind of really interesting to see this development and so on and so forth. Uh, Here's where I also don't quite understand because there is some also space exploration. We have it to where Invincible is kind of leaving Earth's atmosphere in the early episodes. And I guess eventually he does pass out. But then eventually we have Invincible going further on out of being out of the atmosphere. And in my brain noggin, I'm like, well, this guy had spent 2 weeks out in space and he cannot eat or drink anything because space helmet. And so, anyways, that was just like hilarious. Where basically Cecil had told Invincible, I guess, to pack a lunch, and there was no way for him to be able to do that because there was no way for him to be able to eat said lunch. So I don't know. So going on in here, yeah, we eventually have Invincible going on a space journey and going on and trying to have to basically save the day. And so it seems that every time we're going to quite possibly think that Invincible is going to 100% have a mission that is going to be boring, eventually there has to be something that comes out of that. And there is also a bizarrish opening scene that happens within this show that I'm like, okay, why? It's like, what does that have anything to do with the rest of the story? And I kind of there's stuff about this show that I consistently forget about because there's small uh little things that I otherwise are just like, okay, why was that important for this episode? What does that have anything to do with anything? But yeah, so let's go into spoilers about these episodes so we can get this one out of the way. Um, I still love the show. It's really great. I'm so happy that this is able to be a Amazon series, and um, I hope we can probably as long as possible continue this series. I hope it gets renewed for a second season, or like, well, I don't know. I don't know how long this series ran for in comic books, so I don't know how long the story will go. But I don't know. I think it's a really interesting story, and I'm really enjoying and investing in most of the characters. So let's go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time I'm going to spoil this show. So we go off into some dusty or some sand-like environment somewhere where a guy is trying to open up some tomb to eventually have him go in to be consumed by some Egyptian spirit to where he goes off and attacks people. I'm like, okay, so what does that have anything to do with the rest of the story? Oh, nothing? Oh, okay, so we seemingly have throughout this episode Detective Demon mentioning how Omni-Man's wife is going to start getting suspicious about Omni-Man, and eventually that will probably lead for Omni-Man's son to also get suspicious about Omni-Man as well. And so Omni-Man is talking to Demon Detective, and he's like, well, you Demon Detective, I'm getting out of here. And so, because we have it to where Omni-Man is like, you need to stop coming to my house. You need to stop bugging me, and you need to just stop your investigation because it's going nowhere. And so, we eventually, towards the tail end of this episode, we have it to where Cecil ends up banishing Demon Detective to hell because Demon Detective just won't stop. And so I thought that was really interesting. So we have it to where also in this episode we end up having the last Mahler twin, the Mahler character, going and trying to uh, put a drill into his arm to eventually get a blood sample so he can clone himself. And he gets raw hamburger and puts it into this this device to feed his cloned character. And so we have it to where the teen team are being ushered into the Guardians of the Globe headquarters, and they are accompanied by Cecil. And so we have it to where Robot is talking to Rex Splode, and he is telling him, hey man, like, how about you try to not get your relationships with women kind of either sabotaging our team or like distracting yourself. And while Robot is touching Rex Explode, he ends up taking a blood sample of Rex Explode. Because we have it to where I think Robot is going to take blood samples of maybe quite possibly all of the teen teams and try and quite possibly either uh, put their powers into this new twin or something else is going to happen out of this. So, because we end up having Rex Explode talking to Monster Girl, and they're kind of doing a recap with one another about, like, well, hey, like, no hard feelings about me beating the crap out of you and kicking your teeth out and all kinds of things. And Rex Explode is like, oh yeah, it's all forgiven, yeah, whatever. So we're all on the same team. So we have it to where eventually Rex Explode mentions that there's a big blood smear upon the Guardians of the Globe and headquarters. And so Cecil says, yeah, that is meant to be that way. I want to remind you on if any of you get cocky to look at this blood stain and realize that there had been somebody here before you, kind of thing. And also to realize that any number of you could be dead at some point. And so Cecil mentions that he will eventually have the bloodstain wiped off when these new Guardians of the Globe have earned their keep, kind of thing. And so we have Cecil going to Omni-Man and mentioning about a Mars mission, and because we end up having Invincible and Omni-Man going out to do a fly out so that way Invincible can learn how to fly better, and we end up having Invincible flying way too low, and it ends up is causing some like dust like dust whatever thing. And so we end up having both Omni-Man and uh, Invincible flying to the top of Mount Everest, and so they were in the sand, but then they go all the way to Everest, bizarrely. And so we have it to where Omni-Man is telling Invincible to, like, hey, like, make sure you take deep breaths because the air's thin up here. And so Invincible's like, yeah, it is thin. And so we have some climber that is making his way all the way to the top of Everest to be met by Invincible and Omni-Man, and and Invincible's like, hey guy, I'm invincible. Look at me. Hey, look at. So let's take a photo together and blah blah blah. So we we go on and have uh, Invincible going off on his date with Amber, where they are to go and we are to get to learn things about Amber. It seems that she has gone and seemingly traveled a lot, and we have it to where Amber mentions, like, well, hey, like, uh, Invincible. How? What is his actual name? Because I keep calling him Invincible. Um, Mark. There we go. I'm never gonna remember that name, but we're gonna try to. We have to our Amber mentions to Mark. Well, hey, like, have you ever traveled anywhere? And so Mark mentions this, like, well, I've traveled to Mount Everest, and so we have it to where Amber is mentioning, oh, well, that's great and all. Did you end up traveling through China, or where did you go? How did exactly did you get to Mount Everest? And Mark doesn't exactly know the math of it all because reasonably he wasn't the actual one flying anywhere. It was just like he was just following his dad, so he has even no clue where he actually came and went and whatever. And so we have it to where it seems that this date is going well. It seems that Amber is wanting them to have yet another date, but it seems that eventually Mark is going to go home to eventually hear that Omni Man is going to try and do, or going to have to do, some Mars mission. And we end up having it to where Omni Man is like, you know what? I am not going to do this mission. Like, I don't want to do this. Like, I would rather just go and spend time with my wife because it's overdue. And so we end up having it to where Mark mentions and pitches in. He's like, "Well, hey, how about I go and like me and my dad have almost the exact same powers anyway, so how about I just go?" And so we end up finding out the main reason why Omni Man was to be sent on this Mars mission was to get him out of the States so they can investigate and figure out what had happened with Omni Man. But if anything, Cecil is like, well, if anything, we can see how trustworthy this Invincible kid is and see what side he's really on and see where his heart is. So we can have him kind of earn his stripes, so to speak. And so we have it to where Invincible is outside of this ship, basically just like kind of just holding on to the ship while it's basically just going off. Like the ship is going and rocketing off, and Invincible is just flying onto it and then just attaching himself onto the ship. And he's following these astronauts at a kind of stealthy distance. And so we have it to where Invincible, before he was to leave, he's to talk to Adam Eve about going on this Mars mission. And so Adam Eve is contemplating while talking to Mark about even being a superhero anymore. She's like, you know, I don't know what I want to do anymore. I don't even think I even want to be a superhero anymore. And Mark is like, wow, like, why is she going to that far of consensus of like she doesn't even really want to, like, she doesn't want to be a superhero, she doesn't want to be anything? Why is she making this, what's going on with her? But Mark just doesn't have time to deal with Adam Eve's problems, so he just goes, meh, like, I guess I'll figure that out in the next episode. I don't know, I think recently we have it to where Adam Eve has some feelings for Mark, and maybe that is driving a wedge between him and her, and maybe that's why Adam Eve is trying to go, you know what? I don't think I even want to be a superhero anymore. Maybe I just don't want to be with the Guardians of the Globe because I'm going to have to forcibly work with Invincible consistently. And so, I don't know. We'll have to figure that out within the next episodes. So, going on into here, we have Omni-Man and his wife, while Invincible is off doing his Mars mission. Omni-Man is desperate to have his wife go out with him to go anywhere. Like, hey, can we just go out and just have a night on the town? And I think his wife's name is Deborah. Ultimately, Deborah is saying, "Well, I have to sell this house. I have to sell some house of Red Rush's wife, who she is kind of mentioning some things here and there, but it seems like she's supposedly a alcoholic of sorts, and so we have it to where Omni Man is kind of mentioning how like yeah she needs to cut out the sauce kind of thing, kind of really playing her down, and we have it to where Deborah is just like, well, I gotta sell this house, I gotta sell this house. And Omni Man is like, we need to go out. We need to do something. And so we have it to where both Omni Man and his wife go out in the town to drink wine. And while that is going on, there's some destruction of some monster going on in the background. And so while Omni Man is talking to his wife about if she trusts him or not, because of all of what's going on and how everyone is getting very confused. Even Omni Man is kind of like, yeah, I'm not really exactly trusting what all is really going on, because from all of the murders and how I was the sole survivor, like I don't even understand what is all going on right now. And so the only thing that Omni Man can really understand is his trust of his family. And so Omni Man is asking for the trust of Deborah, and Deborah is trying to mention to Omni Man about, oh my God, there's some monstrous destruction of the city, and Omni Man is like, I don't care about that. I just want to know that I have your trust. And so Deborah's like, you have it, and so Deborah's like, but take care of that monster. And Omni Man's like, dude, I'll have Cecil, like, just, he needs to just earn his pay today. Like, I'm gonna have a night on the town with my wife and F everything else. So we eventually have it to where I kind of like that moment, to be brutally honest, to have like a Superman that's like, or a superhero that's like, you know what, I'm just gonna take a day off for once and and just have a night on the town with my woman and if anything else that's going on for one night. So we have it to where Invincible is on Mars, and we end up finding out while Invincible's back is turned to try and eat a sandwich or trying to uh, look through his phone. We have it to where Invincible looks back and realizes that every single one of the astronauts have been dragged away somewhere. And so we have it to where Invincible tries to follow the pattern of footsteps and ends up finding out that these astronauts have been taken by these Martians of Mars. And so we have it to where Invincible ends up going and finding out that there are some very little bizarrish like creatures that look like dogs or whatever to Invincible. And so we eventually have that Invincible gets further on into talking to these Martians, some Emperor of Mars he ends up talking to, and so we end up having it to where the Martians end up releasing these astronauts to this Invincible character because they are like, wow, like you are actually much stronger than the other humans, and so we they eventually have it to where this Invincible character ends up going and uh, getting the release of these astronauts. And so Invincible and these astronauts are just running like heck to get off of this planet. And so because all the Martians and everybody are coming after him. So we have it to where the astronauts could not get their ship off the planet, and so Invincible takes and grabs the ship, lifts it off the planet, and so eventually the astronauts go and do their thrusters, and then they end up careening off. We eventually find out that one of the astronauts is actually not one of them, and is actually an alien that is disguised as someone. Uh, and so, all while we eventually see one of the actual astronauts that had been possessed by some alien, going and trying to destroy all of the aliens of Mars, all the Martians of Mars. And so with these dog-like creatures that end up attacking them. And so like it was very bizarre and hard to describe within this part of the whole Mars mission, whatever. And so when eventually we have Invincible coming back home, we have it to where Invincible comes back home, finding out that seemingly both his parents were of course going at it, and so we have Invincible coming home, and his father says, "Oh wow, I didn't realize that you were here or back so soon," and so we have it to where, God, I think I'm missing something here and there. There's probably a real important part somewhere where I've missed, but if anything, if I forget any about anything, I don't know. We'll figure it out. So we eventually have Invincible going about his day, and just like eventually, I'm sure conking out because I'm sure he's exhausted. So we have it to where Cecil ends up banishing the demon detective off to hell, and reasonably, I think that's all that really actually happens within this episode. We eventually have Robot going to the Mahler twin to, I think, put the DNA sample of Rex Explode into his DNA to, I think, give the Mahler twins some extra powers and so on and so forth. But I don't know. We'll kind of see how that develops. And so eventually, I think I've kind of covered everything. I think the only fascinating thing was when Invincible was talking about where Omni-Man had come from, and how and also Deborah was mentioning about Omni-Man, about that he's never seen one other person of Omni-Man's planet, kind of really suggesting that maybe Omni-Man had made any number of this stuff up, and maybe Omni-Man is not from the planet that he had said that he is from, and maybe he's made up a lot of stuff. Kind of interesting to see how this is all going to boil down, of maybe Omni-Man is a complete 100% liar, and that maybe Omni-Man had come to this planet to try and quite possibly assimilate onto this earth, and like try to make a baby with some woman and have an offspring and so on and so forth, kind of eventually being to the point where eventually that's the reason why Omni-Man never was a part of the Guardians of the Globe, and then eventually does just kill them all off. So I don't know. There could be a whole entire lie about Omni-Man where we're going to find out eventually the real true truth about this character. And we have it to where Invincible talked to his father, and he's like, "Man, I can't believe that you would have left your planet, your home, your family for another planet that no one knows you, no one knows who you are, and you had to basically start from scratch and come to this planet to supposedly defend it. And yeah, so we have it to where Invincible was asking some pretty decent questions to his father, and Omni Man was trying to just kind of like, I think, deflect some things. Just like, well, like I felt that I had to do it. Like I felt that um, it was my calling, and so on and so forth, to protect this planet. And so, yeah, there's something kind of sketchy about Omni Man, to be brutally honest. Like I don't know. I'm thinking like there had to have come to some kind of consensus that Omni Man had to have remembered him killing his entire group of friends or something. Like, there had to have been some kind of consensus of what happened to Omni Man, unless it's actually been Omni Man purposely playing everybody this entire time, which would be a very interesting story. We'll see how this all plays out. Without a doubt, I'm going to have to get out of here. So, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.